So this is not a presentation as such. It's to give you an indication of how the Memory of the World program is thinking in terms of implementing its activities as part of the UNESCO larger agenda of promoting cooperation between HQ and a field offices. So to do that, I think it's worth reminding ourselves this thing is not particularly doing its job. Okay. So first, I'll just remind us of the objectives of. I'm afraid this is not working very well. Okay. So if you could just roll them now. So what's important for me is to underline the three objectives of the Memory of the World program. The first one of which is to identify documentary heritage of national, regional, and of global significance. The second one is to preserve that documentary heritage. And the third one is to enhance universal access to it. And more importantly, we have the 2015 recommendation, which we discussed a lot yesterday. What it does is to serve a dual purpose. The first one is to provide a normative justification for the program. And the second one is to provide a programmatic framework. So based on that, what do we see as the strategic shifts, strategic directions that we ought to be going in? The first one is to continue to support our member states in their implementation of the 2015 recommendation, along with their reporting on the actions that they take to give effect to this recommendation. So obviously, setting up and strengthening national Memory of the World committees is paramount as far as we are concerned, because they will serve as an implementation vehicle for the 2015 recommendation. The experts that contribute towards the national reports produced by our member states almost always are derived from the national Memory of the World committees. So it is important for us to continue to support these efforts, and our field officers are working tirelessly to do exactly that. And at HQ, we are also attempting as much as possible to carry on with regional consultations and interregional conferences such as this one. We have had consultations in Abuja, in Tunis, the first interregional conference in Panama, and a consultation for the Arab region, at least Arab sub-region in Alexandria at Bibliothèque Alexandrina, Tehran, La Paz, and now here in Gwangju. This is the second interregional conference. So the idea is to stimulate interest in the setting up of national committees, and linked to that, the strengthening of regional committees, and of course linked to that, the support of member states towards their implementation of the 2015 recommendation. Just a note on national reporting on the 2015 recommendation. So far, 38 countries have submitted such reports, broken down as follows. Group 1, that's Western European and North American states, 11 member states. Not very good. Group 2, Eastern European states, 12. Group 3, Latin American and Caribbean states, 4. Asia and Pacific states, 6. That is a surprise to us at HQ because this is the home of MoCap. And MoCap is the more vibrant of the 2 existing regional committees. African states, perhaps understandably, 2. And this is Papa's Achilles' heel, that he's totally worried that African participation is that low. And that is why our efforts are targeted to some extent at strengthening ACMO. This is the African equivalent of MoCap. And Arab states, only 3. So obviously, in terms of the overall picture, 38 member states is not bad at all, because there are several other recommendations that UNESCO implements across its 5 sectors. So I think that we have done better than most other recommendations, especially within the sector for communication and information. But quite clearly, we do need to work a little bit more. And so our efforts are targeted at the formation of national committees, the strengthening of regional committees, and where they don't exist, at least hoping to set up some. So to move on, the second strategic direction for us is supporting upstream preservation policy advocacy among member states and capacity building among memory institutions. And there are examples of that. For example, we now have the Global Policy Forum, which is supported by the Japanese Funds in Trust. The first edition took place at HQ in Paris in November 2018, and the second edition is going to take place in March 2020. And I would encourage you, if you are interested, to follow up with us, and we will see if we can support your participation. You could plan to have other activities alongside the Global Policy Forum. One of the innovations is to have exhibitions by national committees, for example. That's one thing that we could take advantage of to try to stimulate interest in the setting up of national committees. And then we have had capacity building workshops in Bhutan. We had one in 2018, and this year in Adelaide, we have just completed one. And the focus again was on disaster risk reduction as a strategy for documentary heritage preservation and accessibility. So that's the second strategic direction. Moving on to the third one. So we're trying also to focus on enhancing strategic thematic partnerships. For example, with the Digital Preservation Coalition, yesterday you heard about the Executive Guide on Digital Preservation as part of the PERSIST initiative. That's one thing. We have also a partnership with INRIA, which I spoke about yesterday, on software source code development as documentary heritage. And of course, we continue to forge links with IFLA, ICA, with respect in particular to endangered documentary heritage and so on and so forth. So this is the third thematic, sort of strategic direction for us. And finally, we continue to, or at least we are trying to step up our efforts to refine a conceptual framework, the conceptual framework for documentary heritage as sustainable development. What exactly does this mean, theoretically speaking and empirically speaking? So theoretically, we're trying to understand the conceptual interconnections. And for us, for example, we envision sustainable development in terms of three pillars: environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, social sustainability. That's what defines the 23rd Agenda for Sustainable Development. And we have specific interventions that are linked to the implementation of the 2015 recommendation. And as I already said, we have disaster risk reduction as a preservation strategy, which is quite clearly linked to environmental sustainability. And we are trying, working with European organizations like the Europeana Foundation, to determine the contributions that cultural industries make towards the gross domestic product of countries. What the Europeana Foundation is interested in is to make a policy case to argue that culture industries, in fact, make money, and that therefore governments need to invest in them, which is very important. That could be a compelling argument if we could adduce empirical evidence to that effect. So therefore, that cultural industries as GDP contributors is linked to economic sustainability. If you talk about social sustainability, the third bullet point under interventions for 2015 recommendation would seem to apply cultural heritage as empowerment for inclusive citizenship, for good governance, for sustainable development itself, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the entry points that we think can help us to make the conceptual connection between sustainable development and documentary heritage. And then more concretely, we can link that to specific targets that have been developed within the framework of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And the targets would seem to be those, among others. For example, target 11.4. So this refers to Sustainable Development Goal 11. It's about protecting and safeguarding the world's cultural and natural heritage. So we're contributing towards that target. And then you've got target 1610, which is about ensuring public access to information and protecting fundamental freedoms. Quite clearly, when you look at that in terms of issues of empowerment, of inclusion, of identity, of good governance, and so on and so forth, it would appear to reinforce that. And then you've got target 4.7, which is about quality education. Learners acquiring knowledge and skills for sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, a culture of peace, non-violence, global citizenship, and so on and so forth. That, again, is one specific target towards which we are making a contribution. So these then are the four programmatic directions in which we are moving. And hopefully, with your support, with your activities, we can make a contribution towards these, and we can argue that quite clearly this requires interregional cooperation, not only between the regional committees of memory of the world, but also between headquarters in Paris and our field offices. And as I said yesterday in my introductory remarks, this is exactly what we are trying to do to ensure that our field officers take the lead in defining the agenda for documentary heritage as sustainable development. Thank you.